Another weekend of major gun violence across the country. COVID cases surging in the UK. What does this mean for us here in the US? And Tinder is going to let you block your ex and maybe even some coworkers. Monday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Monday, June 7th. I am Jill Wagner. Carlo, still on paternity leave. And Baker is back from vacation, rested and relaxed.
And tan.
Ready to join us on the podcast. Hey, Baker.
Don't forget tan, Jill. For the first time in a year and a half, my skin saw the sun. I was laying by the pool. I had many cocktails of Coronas and martinis and all those amazing things you drink by the beach. I had the greatest time for the first time ever, Jill. I realized, though, this was a very important moment for me where my age and my SPF do not match anymore. So it was a big moment for me.
Well, Baker, we're so happy to have you back. Let's get to the first story, which is actually quite serious here. Gun violence across the U.S. It was another weekend of just so much deadly gun violence across this country. In Miami, Florida, a shooting at a graduation party left 3 people dead and 6 others injured. There was another shooting over Memorial Day weekend, also in Miami. That left 3 dead and dozens injured. So much so that the Miami-Dade police director, Freddie Ramirez, saying every weekend it is the same thing, and we've just got to band together. In New York City, a 10-year-old boy was shot inside of his home from a bullet that was fired outside. In Chicago, gun violence killed at least 5 people and injured dozens more. It's just tragic.
Jill, that police director in Miami-Dade County, absolutely right. Every weekend, every day, we have another one that happens, another mass shooting, and we are numb to this. You mentioned New York City, 20 people shot in 17 separate incidents just between Friday and Sunday evening, including those 2 fatalities. Jill, USA Today broke this all down in terms of the amount of guns that are in this country. There are now more guns than people here in the U.S., 121 firearms for every 100 residents. America has less than 5% of the world's population, but 40% of the privately owned guns in the world. We can have a whole argument and a conversation when it comes to gun control, all those other sorts of measures. It doesn't look like Congress is going to be doing anything when it comes to that, Jill. So we're just essentially left with more violence day after day after day.
And speaking of politics, it's Joe Manchin in the middle once again. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who's key to Democrats' control of the chamber, saying that he is not going to support his party's sweeping voting rights bill. It's called the For the People Act. And he says that he's not supporting it because it has no Republican support and that it's not going to help bring the country together. It is an 800-page bill. It would require states to expand mail-in voting and increase hours of operation at in-person polling sites. Manchin said that instead he supports the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which he says does have bipartisan support. And he wrote an op-ed in the Charleston Gazette-Mail. And he's also continuing to push against Democrats' efforts to eliminate the filibuster.
Yeah, Jill, none of this really was surprising. Joe Manchin has been insistent for months that he was never going to nuke the filibuster. And as you mentioned, in his op-ed that he wrote, which was, by the way, published in West Virginia at a newspaper there, he says, listen, because it is not a bipartisan piece of legislation, he is not supporting it. Now, he and Kirsten Sinema, the senator from Arizona, really giving cover to a lot of other Senate Democrats who also don't seem to want to nuke the filibuster. That includes Dianne Feinstein of California. This really makes Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden's road ahead when it comes to legislation, Jill, really difficult, as they're really limited on what they can do. You can only do so many things through budget reconciliation. You might be able to get the infrastructure bill passed through reconciliation, but that might be it, Jill. And as the window of opportunity for Democrats continues to close, given the fact that history is not on their side to keep at least the House of Representatives in the midterms next year, the amount of time that Joe Biden has to get any sort of legislative achievements done continues to get smaller by the day, Jill.
A bit of a win for Biden overseas. The G7 nations, that's the U.S., UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan, have agreed to a major tax overhaul for international companies, a global minimum corporate tax of at least 15%. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's been in London for that meeting. She says it could prevent American companies from shifting their profits overseas to avoid paying taxes. Also part of the agreement, global companies are going to pay taxes where they generate sales, not just where they have a physical presence.
Yeah, Jill, this, by the way, we should note Google and Facebook both have come out saying that they welcome fair and competitive tax rates, although we should note Google less interested in this tax rate as Facebook is much more interested in this 15% than they are. But this is lower, by the way, the 15% tax rate, lower than the 21% that Joe Biden had originally proposed out there, really to prevent countries from luring companies with low or even zero tax rates. There's still a long way to go on this, Jill, and many analysts are pointing to the EU as sort of the main hurdle that you have to overcome here, because Ireland in particular, Ireland's tax rate is 12.5%. France is 31%. So you're going to have to find a really good common ground for both, even for those two countries to even get to 15 here.
Yeah, Janet Yellen has called it a race to the bottom, just in terms of which country will have the lowest tax rate and bring in all of these corporations. I had a guest on Wake Up with Cheddar before who said, it's quite notable, Ireland not signing on to this. So how much teeth it actually has, we don't know, but potentially a win for Biden, at least as a talking point. Let's talk about the pandemic in India, in New Delhi. They've started to lift some of their COVID lockdowns, a sign that perhaps things are improving a bit there. Over in the UK, though, Brits are facing a fresh COVID lockdown as that Delta variant, which is the one that was first discovered in India, spreads across Europe. Cases up by 89% in just the past 2 weeks. Deaths also increasing. What's interesting, though, about the UK, Baker, is that they had seemingly done everything right. So they had this really strong vaccine rollout, mostly the AstraZeneca vaccine. They had pretty tight lockdowns. The fear, though, from some experts is that if this is what's happening over in the UK, then it's only a matter of time before it happens here in the US, which is why we are at this, race against time when it comes to vaccinations.
Look, Jill, we're at an interesting juncture right now here in this country. The Washington Post had this great breakdown basically saying that the U.S. is now administering less than 1 million COVID vaccinations a day. Gone are the day, Jill, from just a month or so ago when we were administering over 3 million vaccines a day when we're doing less than that. So now there's just the big worry of whether or not we'll get to that 70% goal that Joe Biden has by July the 4th. And it's really interesting. It's a tale, Jill, of two different parts of this country. The East and the West Coast are hitting their vaccination goals. You're seeing states like California hit 70% already. But when you look at the Midwest and the South, it's a completely different story out there. Alabama, I don't know if you saw this. The Washington Post said Alabama is vaccinating four out of every 10,000 residents there. 12 states, including Utah, Oklahoma, Montana, the Dakotas, West Virginia, their vaccinations are below 15 daily shots per 10,000 residents, which is why you're seeing all of these states, Jill, do these sorts of giveaways, from lottery to free food to free sporting event tickets. But Jill, I don't know if it's working because, again, these numbers are not moving at the rates that you would want to, especially given by July the 4th out there.
A sign of some sense of normalcy, the cruise ship industry ready to dive back in with the very first North American cruise ship setting sail over the weekend. Celebrity Millennium left from St. Martin on Saturday for the first time since the pandemic. So there were roughly 500 passengers on board. About 95% were fully vaccinated, which is in line with the CDC's cruise guidance. Children who are not yet eligible to receive vaccinations were required to show negative COVID tests before boarding. Baker, you just got back from Florida, as we were talking about. It was your first trip of the pandemic. Curious, how are the airports? Anything else that you observed in general?
Jill, it is...
From Del Boca Vista.
Yes, from Del Boca Vista. Yes, exactly. Kramer for president, please. Jill, it is like another world in Florida. And by the way, residents in Florida seem to be very happy with how things are. There are literally no mask mandates anywhere. You can walk into a restaurant and you don't have to wear a mask. You can walk into a store. You don't have to wear a mask. All they essentially say is is you don't have to wear a mask as long as you're vaccinated, but you don't have to prove that whatsoever. We should note Ron DeSantis, the governor there, has basically said no vaccine passports whatsoever to prove to anybody that you're vaccinated. Different story here in New York City, Jill. I have friends who are getting me to go do Pride events with them, and the requirements to get into these Pride events are what we have here in New York, the Excelsior Pass, which is essentially our COVID vaccine passport to get into these things. And our mask mandate's much different here. So while it was refreshing to not have to wear your mask at all in Florida, it definitely was another world. I will have to say the airport packed to the gills. My plane completely packed. Every single seat was full. Every person, it was good, was wearing their mask. We were lucky none of the flight attendants had to fight with anybody about wearing their masks or any of that stuff. But really, Jill, it felt like a sense of normalcy, but also you have this trepidation from where we were at in the pandemic of getting your life back at the same time, because you're like, wow, I don't have to do that anymore.
And talk to me about the buffet. You said you actually went to a buffet?
Yes, Jill, I have not seen a buffet in so long. And so we went to go visit, so my husband's grandfather turned 90, which again, it is an amazing moment to see him and celebrate him at 90 years old, fully vaccinated, getting his life back. We went to a golf course at the club where they were at, and they had the buffet open, and everything was there, and packed to the gills at the buffet. And I have to admit, I was mildly nervous, being like, okay, can I grab this? I feel weird grabbing this, this tuna sandwich over here, or grabbing this, cookie over here. But listen, everything was back to normal in Florida. It's like almost like the pandemic never happened there.
Oh my gosh, people coughing on the cookies,
yes.
Then you grab the cookie. I can't even imagine. Okay, Baker, we've got a new royal. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry welcome their second child, Lilibet Lily Diana Mountbatten Windsor, weighing 7 pounds, 11 ounces. According to a statement, both mother and child are healthy and well and settling in at home. So Lily is named after her great-grandmother, Her Majesty the Queen, whose family nickname is Lilibet. Her middle name, Diana, chosen to honor her beloved late grandmother, the Princess of Wales. This is the Queen's 11th great-grandchild,
Amazing.
If you could believe it.
I can. Also, Lily, by the way, now 8th in line to the British throne, Jill. This after her big brother Archie, he is 7th. Her arrival actually knocking Prince Andrew down to 9th place in the line of succession.
I didn't know that.
So that's also interesting. By the way, baby Lily, also the first British royal in line to the throne to be born here in the United States. Now, with the name Lilibet, this is interesting when you look back at the history of this name. As a young girl growing up in the royal family, Princess Elizabeth found it apparently difficult to pronounce her name. She often fumbled that name, so this is why she always basically called herself Lilibet, because she could never pronounce her full name as Elizabeth. But it has a lot of significance to her because she basically wrote in the floral wreath tribute atop the coffin for her mom when she died in 2002. She wrote a note that read, "In loving memory, Lilibet," to her mother. British reports out there also speculate in a goodbye letter to Prince Philip. She also wrote that as Lilibet in that letter to him as well. So a lot of significance with this name. This also is interesting because reports out there say that Prince Harry had to get her okay, the Queen's okay, to give his daughter this name. She apparently had to sign off on all of this. So you would have to think that any sort of tumultuous relationship between the palace and Prince Harry might not be as bad if she's already essentially giving the blessing here. And by the way, Prince William, Prince Charles, everybody already coming out and congratulating the family on this amazing news.
Okay, you are a wealth of information, Baker Machado. I had no idea that the Queen had to sign off on the name, I guess, especially given that it was for her.
Right.
Hopefully this will help bring them all together. And what's interesting is, as much as Harry and Meghan are breaking away from the royal family, they're not. I mean,
right.
Because they're still naming their kids. Look, Diana is Harry's mom. Mm-hmm. The Queen is his grandmother. They're always going to be that way. And obviously, but just the fact that it is such a traditional name tells you that maybe
Yes.
this royal split is not forever.
Jill, there is a reason why you don't see Princess Suri out there whatsoever. You're seeing all these names that are sticking in with royal tradition, even if it's cool. I remember the whole discussion with Kate and William first had George, which was how would you, because by the way, of all the grandchildren that are out there, he most likely would be the one potentially after his dad, William, to be the next in line to take over the throne. How do you pick a name that fits in line with British succession, but also sounds cool? And George really fit that bill really perfectly. And I love that it's a tribute to the mother as well, to Diana as well, which is great. So this is great. It's to the Queen and to Diana. We call that a twofer in this business, Jill.
Okay, so I don't even want to mention this in the podcast, but I guess we should because people are talking about it. This Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul fight. Social media star and boxer Logan Paul went 8 rounds with the boxing legend Floyd Mayweather Sunday night at Hard Rock Stadium in Vegas. The fight was an exhibition, so there was no winner. Ultimately, this all just seemed to be a big spectacle.
100%, Joe, because Floyd Mayweather came out saying that he was impressed with Logan Paul. He said he was, quote, better than I thought he was. Logan's trainer even came out saying that the whole goal of this, Jill, was for Logan Paul just to last the 8 rounds, which he did. We should note, none of this goes on anybody's records. This is an exhibition match. So Floyd Mayweather keeps his perfect 50-0 record. Logan Paul, for what it's worth, is still winless. He's never won a boxing match whatsoever. But this was all for attention for Logan Paul to say that he is now a boxer. And this was all for the money for Floyd Mayweather as well, because he can make money and still keep his reputation as an undefeated boxer out there. I think this is a wash. I think this was all for attention. And I can't stand this story.
So let's move on. In tennis news, Serena Williams and Roger Federer are both out of the French Open. Serena faced a shocking upset over the weekend when Elena Rybakina, I actually do not know how to pronounce her name, Rybakina, and I really apologize. Let's do a pickup here. What do you know how to say it, Baker?
I don't. We'll just say a Kazakhstan tennis star.
Okay. All right. Let's just do a pickup there. Okay, Baker, so let's move on because I feel like we're both annoyed by this story. I'm even annoyed I put it in the newsletter and the podcast today.
What happened?
Moving on to tennis news. Serena Williams and Roger Federer are both out at the French Open. Serena Williams faced a shocking upset over the weekend when a player from Kazakhstan clinched a victory in their 2-set face-off. Williams, though, she's going to be looking ahead to Wimbledon as her next chance to match Margaret Court's record of 24 Grand Slams. Roger Federer has also exited the tournament, and he just cited the impact of 2 knee surgeries. He says he's got to listen to his body, and he doesn't want to push himself too quickly. Maybe he's looking ahead as well to Wimbledon. Back to Serena, though, I'm pulling for her. But as time goes on, it does get harder for her to tie Margaret Court's Grand Slam record because you've got all these new stars coming up. Even just think about Naomi Osaka back in 2018 in the U.S. Open. She wasn't really a household name at that point. Now she's one of the best tennis players in the world. I don't know. What do you think, Baker?
Even Coco Gauff, another name that we talk about a lot as well on the women's side, and she's incredibly young as well. Jill, I hate saying this. I worry the window of opportunity for Serena to continue to stay as a dominant force in this sport is starting to close. That doesn't mean that she's not going to win down the road. She could win Wimbledon. She could win the U.S. Open down the road, and I'm really pulling for her. But look, LeBron James has been doing so many interviews lately about the slide maybe that he's having at his age, the Lakers slide as well, and he's like, look, you only can stay at the top of your game for so long, and every year you sort of slide back just a little bit. You're still an incredibly dominant performer and an incredibly dominant athlete, but you being at the top of your game for so long, which she has been, is just so hard in this sport when there's so many great, amazing names out there. You mentioned Naomi Osaka. I mean, Jill, it's only going to be a matter of time before Naomi Osaka is the #1 player in the entire world. So I'm with you. I'm pulling for Serena. I think she is so incredible for this sport, and I want her to get this record. But the time that the window of opportunity, I fear, is starting to close on that.
She's been an inspiration even for me, because we know she's a mom. She had a really rough time after she gave birth. She had almost actually died because of a blood clot that she had while she was in the hospital. Super scary. She came back. She's in fighting form now for tennis. And I've thought about it because I'm a marathon runner.
Right.
And I thought my days of marathon running are totally behind me. After I had a baby, I remember getting on the treadmill. I could barely walk for 5 minutes. And that is not a joke.
I can imagine.
And I've started to run again. And I do think about her sometimes. And it's like, you know what? Just put on your running sneakers and get out there, Jill.
Right,
You've got no excuses.
but she does that. She does that, and she is an inspiration to all of us, Jill. You're absolutely right in terms of what she's been able to do and get people motivated. I'm really pulling for her, Jill. I really do, because I think tennis and the world is better when Serena is number one.
Okay, Baker, I want to quickly get to one more story here. Tinder launching a new update that lets users block phone contacts on their app. So the feature basically lets users avoid personal contacts, for example, exes, family members, or coworkers. A recent survey from Tinder found that more than 40% of 1,500 respondents have come across an ex-partner on the dating app, which is just kind of brutal.
Oh, yeah. Just so I've said this before. So I met my husband on Tinder, but back in my single days, that was my favorite thing to do, was to go on these dating apps to see if I knew anybody that was on there. So that way I could basically be like, oh, he's on here. Oh, he's on here. Oh, I didn't know he was single. But I can also understand where for so many people who want to get away from all of that or don't want to have an awkward run-in, this provides a huge level of comfort for so many people. And we should also note, Tinder and other dating apps are updating things where you could put your vaccination progress in there, so that way you can say if you're vaccinated, because that obviously will help you want to go out with this person, knowing whether or not they're vaccinated as well, Jill. So I think this is great. I wish this was on Grindr. I wish this was on all these other things as well, Jill.
You know what? I'm sure in time it will be. Okay, Baker, always such fun chatting. I'm so happy you're back from vacation.
I missed you.
And survived the airport and the buffet and everything else. That is what you need to know for Monday, June 7th.